The nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. You know, that quote from Franklin D. Roosevelt has really been sticking with me since I started looking into this whole thing with the Kafue River in Zambia. It's a story about environmental damage, really, a huge disaster. And I think it'll hit home for anyone out there who, cares about what's happening to our planet.
Yeah, it's a powerful statement, isn't it? It makes you think about how we go after resources, even the important ones like copper, and how sometimes that comes with a really big cost. And in the story, it's the Kafue River, this lifeline for millions of people that is paying the price.
And the scale of this thing, this disaster, it's alarming, to say the least. But to really grasp what happened, we need to understand the Kafue River itself. I mean, we're talking about a huge waterway here, over 900 miles long, and it's absolutely essential to life in Zambia.
It really is. It's like the lifeblood of the whole nation. Think about it. 60% of Zambia's population, 20 million people, they all rely on the Kafue River Basin for everything. Drinking water, fishing, agriculture, you name it. And it's a crucial source of water for industries and for making hydroelectric power, too.
So when you have an acid mine spill pouring into the Kafue, like what happened on February 18th, it's not just an environmental disaster, it's a human disaster, too.
Absolutely. And the source of the spill, it was a tailings dam at the Sino-Metals Zambia copper mine. Now, a tailings dam, it's basically a gigantic reservoir for storing the waste products from all the mining. And this waste, it's often full of dangerous chemicals, heavy metals, and acidic water.
And this dam, it just failed, and it unleashed this torrent of toxic waste. 50 million liters, if you can believe it. I mean, that's enough to fill 20 Olympic swimming pools. It's just mind-boggling.
It is. It really is. And this deluge, it's surged into a stream that feeds directly into the Kafue River. And we're not talking about regular water here. This was concentrated sulfuric acid, heavy metals like cadmium, arsenic, lead, the whole toxic mix.
I was reading about a resident who lives near the Kafue, Sean Cornelius, and he was describing the river before the spill. He called it vibrant, alive. Then he said, and this is a direct quote, "Overnight, this river died."
Powerful image, isn't it? Just boom, dead. And within days, there were reports of dead fish all along the riverbanks for over 60 miles downstream. The birds disappeared. Crops were just withering and dying.
It's just hard to fathom the sheer scale of the destruction. And then there's the impact on people, the human cost. The city of Kitwe, a city of 700,000 people, they had to shut down their entire water supply.
That's right, 700,000 people without clean drinking water, just like that. It's hard to imagine the fear, the disruption that must have caused suddenly a basic necessity for life gone. I mean, the immediate impacts are awful, just awful. But it's the long-term stuff that really worries me.
Right. Lasting effects on the environment and on people's health, that's what makes this story so important, I think, for everyone.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. One of the biggest concerns has got to be groundwater contamination. I mean, this acidic waste, it's got all these heavy metals in it, and it can seep into the ground, right? And then it contaminates those aquifers that communities depend on for their water.
So even if the river, cleans itself up eventually, the damage is still there underground, and it could be poisoning people's water for who knows how long.
Exactly, that's the scary part. And these heavy metals like arsenic, lead, cadmium, they don't break down, they just hang around. So they build up in the soil, get into the food chain, and that can lead to all sorts of health problems for years and years.
It's like a ticking time bomb, almost. So what kinds of health problems are we talking about specifically?
Well, exposure to these heavy metals, it can be linked to a whole bunch of things. Developmental problems in kids, damage to the kidneys and liver, even cancer. It's scary stuff. We're talking about a serious public health threat here.
So what's being done? What are they doing right now to deal with this? And what about long-term solutions?
Well, immediately after the spill, the Zambian government, they started this huge effort to try and contain the damage. They've been airdropping lime into the river.
Lime? Why lime?
Right, so lime, it's alkaline, which means it helps neutralize the acid in the water. It's kind of like when you spill some acid in a chemistry lab, you use baking soda to neutralize it. Same idea, but on a massive scale.
Makes sense. So it's like a way to fight back against the acid right away.
That's it. And they're also using these speedboats that have special treatment systems on them to put other neutralizing agents right into the areas that were hit the hardest.
Sounds like a real race against time to me.
It is. It totally is. But containment, that's just the first step. The real challenge is going to be cleaning up the river and the surrounding areas for the long haul. That's going to be much more complicated, and it's going to be expensive.
And who's going to pay for all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that question really gets to the heart of who's responsible here. The Zambian government has said, flat out, that they expect Sino-Metals, the company that runs the mine, to cover the entire cost of the cleanup.
And what has Sino-Metals said? Have they responded to those demands?
Well, the chairman of Sino-Metals, Zhong Paiwen, he made a public apology for the spill, and he said that they were committed to, quote, restoring the environment. But of course, those are just words right now. The real test is going to be what they actually do, whether they follow through.
It's one thing to apologize and make promises after a disaster like this. The real challenge is turning those words into action, into real results.
I agree 100%. And this whole situation, it brings up a bigger conversation about Chinese mining operations in Zambia in general. They've been pretty controversial for a while now, haven't they?
I have. It's a complicated issue for sure. You've got the economic side, the social side, and of course the environmental side.
Exactly. I mean, these mines create jobs, right? And they bring in a lot of money for Zambia's economy. Copper is one of their big exports, and China, they're a major investor in all of this.
But then you've got the other side. The concerns about safety standards, labor practices, are they protecting the environment, all of that. And this spill, it seems like it's really brought all of that to the surface, front and center.
It really has. And then, of course, you have the whole issue of Zambia's debt to China, which isn't small. It's over $4 billion. And that debt, it gives China some serious leverage when they're dealing with Zambia. So it really makes you wonder, will that debt affect the government's ability to actually hold Sino-Metals accountable? It's a big question mark hanging over all of this.
It's a tangled web, economic development, environmental protection, international relations, corporate responsibility. It's a lot to untangle.
It really is. And just when you think it can't get any more complicated, well, it does. Just a few days after the Sino-Metals spill, there was another leak, a smaller one, at another Chinese-owned mine in Zambia.
Wow, I hadn't heard about that. What happened?
So this second spill, it was smaller, yeah. But it really raised some red flags about safety and whether the company was being negligent. There were even accusations that they tried to cover the whole thing up.
Covered up, really. That's bad. What exactly happened?
Well, tragically, a mine worker, he died after he fell into this acidic wastewater. And that incident, it actually led to the arrest of 2 Chinese managers. They were connected to the alleged cover-up.
So not only was there another spill, but there's this possibility of criminal activity, too.
Yeah.
That just adds another layer to this whole thing.
Yeah, it really does. And it plays into the concerns that a lot of people in Zambia have about these Chinese-owned mines. There's this sense that profits are coming before people, before the environment.
I was reading something by Winhim Winga. He's an environmental engineer in Zambia, and he said it really just brings out the negligence that some investors actually have when it comes to environmental protection. They don't seem to have any concern at all, any regard at all. And I think it's really worrying because at the end of the day, we as Zambian people, it's the only land we have.
That's a powerful statement, and it really captures the frustration and the fear that many Zambians are feeling. It's their land, their water, their health that's at risk.
This whole situation, it's like a snapshot of a much bigger problem, a global one. We have this huge demand for resources, like copper in this case, which we need for our technology, our infrastructure, everything.
Right, exactly. And often it's developing countries that bear the brunt of extracting these resources, and they might have weaker environmental rules, or maybe those rules aren't enforced as strongly.
So where do we go from here? What can be done?
Yeah.
Are there solutions or at least ways to try and fix the damage that's been done?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to happen is a full investigation, an independent one, into both spills. And then those who are responsible need to be held accountable, whether that's through fines, penalties, maybe even criminal charges. That's crucial to prevent this kind of thing from happening again and making sure that companies take safety and the environment seriously.
Accountability is so important, but it doesn't really get at the root of the problem, does it?
You're right, it doesn't. We need to look beyond just these incidents and think about how we approach resource extraction as a whole, particularly in developing countries. Too often, the focus is on short-term profits, and that ignores the long-term costs for the environment and for people.
So what would a more sustainable approach look like? One that's fair to everyone.
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? It's going to take a lot of different things working together. Stronger environmental regulations, making sure those regulations are enforced, more transparency from the companies, and I think most importantly, we need to give local communities more power, more of a say in what happens to their land, their water, and their lives.
That makes a lot of sense, giving people more control over their own destinies. But I also wonder, what about us, the consumers? Do we have a responsibility to think about where the things we use come from, the impact all of this has on the environment and on communities around the world.
Absolutely, we do. It's easy to think of these problems as happening over there, somewhere else, but the reality is we're all connected. The choices we make, the things we buy, the companies we support, it all matters. By learning more, making informed decisions, and demanding more from the companies we do business with, we can make a difference.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. It's a complicated story with no easy answers, but it makes you think about how we interact with the environment, with resources, with each other.
I agree, it does. The Kafue River spill is a tragedy, but it could also be a wake-up call. It reminds us that we need to find a better way forward, a way that values both people and the planet.
Well said. If you've been following along with this deep dive and you want to explore these issues further, we encourage you to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Tell us what you think. Share your insights, your questions. Let's keep the conversation going. Because the future of our planet depends on it.